The Lucknow Super Giants released their captain. That was big news. So did Delhi Capitals, which was more of a surprise. Or maybe he released himself. RCB did not retain their aged leader. Punjab got rid of their special toy captain as well. And so did KKR. So that means that half the teams in the league did not retain their captain. I think that tells you a little bit about this mega auction small retentions pool and how silly it all remains. I mean, in order to keep MS Dhoni, CSK had to pretend that he was a virgin again and get a new rule invented that allowed that to happen. But none of that actually matters to the retentions. And what they tell us is what teams are planning to do, or at the very least, what we think they're planning on doing. And so what we're going to do today is look at every single retention until there is no meat left on the bones. Thanks to MV Play, I was able to make this. Their advanced technology can help any cricket team elevate their skills and performance. So, is this the end of the 5 bowler lineups of Rajasthan Royals? They committed to 1 bowler. And it's not even a big name player, though Sandeep was a nice deal in terms of pay here. Instead, it is all about batting. And I like the idea here, Samson, Jaiswal, Parag and Jurel. Jurel is getting a huge pay rise as well. That's because last year he didn't get paid anything. And he was obviously very good with the bat. But he did struggle a little bit with tempo last year and was negative on true strike rate. Josh Butler is the big dump here. Last year he made 200s, but at his age, with recent injuries, and with other Indian top order batters on their lineup, I can see the hesitancy. Hetmeyer is simply younger as well. This might be a mistake this season, but if you look at the age profile of the players they've kept here, I think it makes a lot more sense going into the future. So it could be a wrong call, right call kind of play. Chahal is interesting for me. He took 18 wickets last year, but he hasn't taken less than that since 2018. He also went at 9s last year, and he's really, really old. When he did actually manage to bowl a good length last year, he was still a very good bowler. Unfortunately, he just doesn't hit that length as much as he used to. So he conceded 10.72 this year. Moving on from Bolt, and Ashwin again probably has more to do with age than anything else. It is actually a shame of the mega auctions, though, that old pros can get moved on very quick from their teams. And the other terrible thing about these constant IPL resets is that the team was worthy of a title, like Delhi in the previous cycle, but they just didn't get one. And now they just have to start again. I don't really see how that helps the league in the long run. They have paid a lot of money for a very old Virat Kohli. If he struggles, which last 2 years he's been pretty good, or even retires early, they're screwed. He seems to be aiming to see this cycle out, but that is not how things always end up. But he was an automatic pick, so if you take him out, that basically means they only retain 2 players. That, my friends, is a rebuild. Remember, they played the playoffs twice in this last cycle, but I think this is right. What is interesting is that it didn't include Cameron Green, who, of course, can't bowl again at the moment. He is 25, he had a decent amount of runs, but was a little bit slow. But RCB said the fact that he couldn't bowl this year was the reason they didn't sign him up. I don't really get that, because his bowling isn't particularly good anyway, and certainly in development. And signing him up now would have meant that they would have paid him less, and they would have had him on the books for 3 years when hopefully one day his bowling does work and his batting's a lot better. But maybe more surprisingly, Will Jacks is gone. And I would assume one of these guys is going to get the right to match. And based on knowing how he fits in, it should be Jacks. Unless you plan to open with Green and just hope that starts to work. Maxwell is releasing his memoirs, so he's basically retiring himself at this point. But age is a factor there too, and his athleticism is clearly on the wane. But look at who they got. Dayal and Patidar. Those were the 2 slam dunks that you just had to retain, and they did both. So they were unsure with everything else, and if that is the case, I think the right decision is to move on. I wonder if keeping Lomro or Roy just around because they're about to mature is worth the chance. Like, their numbers are dire, but a 28-year-old version of these players on a low contract maybe isn't the worst. And what about the quicks? They have 2 international seamers in Mohammad Siraj and Akashdeep. Siraj is good one year and terrible the next. He had a middling one last year, so he's probably worth a shot. However, not for the money it might cost him. Akash has never played, and the few times he is out there, he looked like he should. But it means they have 2 experienced Indian seamers, and they gave both of them up. However, with Avesh Khan, Deepak Chahar, Bhuvi Kumar, Prashid Krishna, Shardul Thakur, Kala Ahmed, T. Nadarajan, Makesh Kumar, I'm running out of names here, all available, not to mention there's probably a few bigger ones I didn't even say then. Maybe this is the option to just go nuts and decide on the bowlers you really want. I honestly like the fact that RCB just looked at their roster and they went, yeah, we got into the playoffs, but we really weren't that good. That's smart planning. And how often do you say that about RCB? Pretty hard snub here on David Warner. Obviously, Rishabh is leaving because of captaincy or not getting captaincy or whatever that is, but this is partly his decision. And the whole captaincy thing in the IPL is probably worth a video in itself, if for no other reason that it's a whole part of cricket that other sports don't have to worry about. Clearly they should keep Pant as a player, but now they have no senior batters left at all. So they were shit last year, and this is not the start they wanted. They get Akshar Patel and Kuldeep, so that means they still have that strong strength in the middle. And they did get rid of all their seamers, but I'm not sure who I would have kept anyway. But with Khalil Ahmed turning 26, I might have thought about him staying around. They got Stubbs on decent money for the salary cap, and Perel is a 22-year-old wicketkeeper with a decent year behind him, so I like that. But my guys, where is Jake Fraser to go? That was the biggest gift ever last year. He came in as a replacement. That means he had a low cap hold, and you didn't need to overpay him. I understand the Fraggle McGurkin train has slowed. Almost stopped, quite literally. But he's scoring at 2 runs a ball in the IPL, and he had a true strike rate of plus 70. He is 22, and he fell into your hands by accident. Outside of Perel, he was the best thing to happen to Delhi in that last cycle, and now he's not retained. Am I missing something here? Anyway, they can run to match him, but surely he's going for a lot of coin. He feels like a Punjab Kings overpay waiting to happen. Overall, this feels a little like RCB. They looked around and realized that not that much was working, and so they're starting again. But while they stunk up the league, they do have some talent. So it is weird of them not to keep all of it. They kept Rashid Khan, and that seems like an obvious one, but we have seen sides mess that up before. Gill and Sudarshan are absolute no-brainers. So before they start, they have 2 top-order young players under contract. The only issue is that at the moment, they're both very similar to each other and both kind of anchors. So if you were preparing for the league 8 years ago, this would be lit. But they are 2 players who fit the age and talent profile, so there's no issue there. Mohammad Shami is probably out because of his age and his health, I say. It took him years to get really good at T20, and now he doesn't seem to get to play it that much. I still think he'll get picked up for a nice coin in this auction. As will David Miller. He's a handy player still, but at 35, but with a decent yet unspectacular year behind him, I think I'm okay with him moving on. I find Rahul Tewatia a weird choice, but his numbers have been solid even if he rarely makes that many runs. I just think that the league scores so much quicker in that role now, but to be fair, they're not paying him that much money. I would have kept just one out of him and Shah Rukh Khan, and probably for me, it would have been the latter, just because I think he can score so much faster. But it's interesting that they've gone with both. But because of their 4 batting retentions, it feels like their batting has some overlap in the anchor role and also in the down-the-order hitter guy who can't really bowl role. Too much overlap, I think. So it seems like they're picking players for talent, not fit. But I like the idea of going with that, even if it is a lot of guys who do kind of the same thing. I probably would have gone with Rashid, Gill, Sai, and SRK, but this doesn't strike me as horribly wrong. It also doesn't feel very inspiring. 2 anchors, 2 middle-aged hitters, and their gun spinner coming off his worst season. It's not quite a rebuild, and it's not quite youth. It's kind of a shrug of a team going ahead who's like, we've got 5 good players, and I suppose we should keep them all around. Mumbai Indians start from a position of strength, which seems unlikely, but they have the best batter, best bowler, and best all-rounder, certainly from an Indian perspective, on paper. Like, that's as easy as it gets. They have another pick in Rohit that really screws them up. But if they get the Rohit that India saw, it's not the end of the world, although age and many other things are probably not on the side of that decision. But over the cycle, it is still a push to invest money and space on someone who is 37. Tilak was a no-brainer as well. And so that means they are one of 3 teams to retain only Indian players. And they do that with, I think it's safe to say, a pretty good core. Despite them being terrible and having to fit Rohit in, this is a pretty decent lineup to rebuild from. What about Kishan? He's clearly a player they seem to have invested in for the long run, and yet they've moved on, at least right at the moment. And I'm okay with this from a form perspective. But they have put 8 seasons into Ishan, and they really haven't got all that much back. This next few years is probably going to be his peak, and if he does go for a low because some other team want him, they can use that as a cover for moving on. They do also have some nice looking overseas seam options in Kotsia and Tushara, and I think that the Sri Lankan is someone that you can let go, but the issue is if he does hit somewhere else, the partnership with Bumrah would have been absolutely spectacular. The South African is a strike bowler who takes wickets, and Mumbai love 2 things, early wickets and left arm seam. Ishan might be the ideal right to match option unless the price gets wacky. But I think I like taking another punt on him in his prime. You know what they say, you can never go home again. But you can be an uncapped player if your owners are really powerful and the league just is desperate for Dhoni to stick around a little bit longer. If this was a properly run league, this would be silly. I mean, it still is silly, but what really should be done is a change in how the retentions work. A freelance system for old professionals who help build the league. And instead, we have the Dhoni law where people can grow back their virginity. But let's talk about Gaikwad, who's a solid anchor with plenty of experience who should be about to peak. It's a lot of money they're going to be paying him, but he does fit the way that they go about it. Jadeja is still there. His numbers hold up. I'm not sure his body does as much. But there aren't many Jadejas on the open market. So I think you do this signing without even thinking too much about it, especially if you have a wicket that turns at home. Patharana is a no-brainer. He looks like a combination of Malinga and Bumrah. He doesn't have either of their smarts or their accuracy yet, but if he has an uptick in either of those two things, he could be the best bowler in this league when Bumrah is not around. Shivam Dube can be a terrible starter in some innings, and he loses confidence quicker than you can fart. But his spin hitting is feared. Even when he's out of form, watch what teams do. They change their bowling against him. That means he has an impact even when he's not making runs. There aren't many players who do that. But of course, all this meant that they didn't retain Tushar Deshpande. And that means that they might have to spend a lot of money on right to match to get him. They believed in him when no one did. And finally last year, he had that great year they've been waiting for. The problem is he's also played 2 internationals, so they couldn't get him as an uncapped player. So they were going to have to spend quite a bit of money on him. And do they really want to spend that much? Like, what is he worth to the market and what is he worth to CSK? And it's also worth wondering if he comes back to them because the market might be still a little bit confused by him. I think it's actually worth putting him back in and then having a look at what spinners you might be able to get, because spinners to CSK are worth a lot more than seam is. One player they haven't retained is Rachin Ravindra, and they never quite got the most out of him last year on what was a bargain contract. He's going to go for a lot more than the 1.8 crore he did this time. So that's another player that they can use that right to match on if they feel the need. The KRL LSG era is dead. Their owner said, "We wanted to retain players with a mindset to win and those who put personal performances secondary." It's a bit of an ouchie, isn't it? I mean, when we saw the on-field argument, we thought this was probably the most likely outcome. But what we didn't expect is for them to go all in on bowling. 3 of their 5 picks. Most teams haven't done that. I mean, Bishnoi and Mayank are automatic. But Mohsin Khan is uncapped, and so it's a bit of a deal. But you are hiring a 26-year-old seamer with 2 horrible years and only 1 decent one back in 2022. They clearly see something that I don't. Ayesh Badoni is a great pick though. At 24, he's been better in each year and he cost very little. And he's the kind of 5th or 6th best batter that you really want from a young Indian player. Devdutt Padikkal was almost impossible to resign, but I would keep an eye on him in the right to match market because he's still a very high quality backup. I'm assuming here that Krunal Pandya wanted to go play with his brother, but at 33, you probably don't want to use your slots on him even after a good year. And it feels like the market for Deepak Huda has never been softer. But in truth, it's also hard to afford all those players when you're spending all of your money on Nicholas Pooran. At times last year, I thought Pooran struggled, and you look at his raw numbers and you completely get it. So I think they did all right. The Mohsin Khan one is the one I'll be watching for a long period. But they have a right to match for Marcus Stoinis in their pocket if they want it as well. And let's be honest, they didn't have a great squad, but they've retained young locals, and they have a fair wedge for the auction as well. Sam Curran is gone, and somewhere there is a Punjab Kings owner just scratching their arms looking for a hit of a player who might bowl 1 over in the power play and being able to back up every batting slot with diminishing returns. Anyway, that is over. Hopefully. Now, while the Kings had a rubbish team, they did actually have a really interesting core of Indian players. Ashutosh, Harshal, Arshdeep, Brar and Jitesh. And they kept none of those. I was not expecting that. Smashatosh is an uncapped player about to turn 26. He interests me a lot. But they went with Shashank Singh for that spot, which is also not terrible, but he is 32. They both had breakout seasons. Obviously, they see these players a lot more than we do. But I think for me, Smashatosh is definitely my guy out of these 2 players. The other retention was Prabh Simran Singh. His numbers look okay, he is 24 and he can keep as well. He's had 2 decent years for a player of his age, and I think on flat wickets he can be very good. I worry about him on wickets that have anything in them and also against really good bowlers. But he's still young. He's got plenty of time to improve. Harshal Patel took wickets again this year, but he is 34 when the next season starts. And they would have had to spend a lot of money on an aging bowler who needs his arm and elbow to be good to get the revolutions he needs. So I'm okay with that. Jitesh didn't work last year. He's 31. I don't think you can keep him. Arshdeep Singh took the most wickets of his career last year, but he also went at more than 10s. He has hovered around that for the last 2 seasons, so he just can't stop people scoring anymore. But he's 25, experienced as hell, and I would have just given him the money. He was being paid 4 crore, so they might have thought that to sign him as a cap player, they would have to go up to 18 crore, and I don't think you can do that. And also, I don't think the market is going to make you pay that much, so you can still get him with a right to match. Harpreet Brar was probably unlucky that there are other uncapped players around, because obviously, again, you're not going to pay him a lot. So he will be a right to match option for them. He is uninspiring, but hard to get away. The overseas players include Liam Livingstone and Kagisa Rabada. I don't think I would right to match either of those players, but of course, if the market is soft, why not? But I think when it comes down to it, the why not is kind of the issue here. There's just not a lot of inspiring stuff when you look at this lineup. So it might look like they're cleaning house here, but I think it's really that they can't pick up any of these players because none of them are worth more than 10 crores anyway. It just shows you that they have a lot of lower end talent and almost nothing else on their roster. They really need to start finding some players who are not just filling up the 11, but can actually make the team better. And note to the owners, that is not Sam Curran. If you're looking for a life partner, I would say find someone who commits to you the way KKR do with Narendra Russell. One has no knees and the other one has stopped bowling off spin. They're older than Rice, and yet here we go again. But it worked last year, and it would take a Jerry Reinsdorf-like GM to come in and break this partnership. But the two West Indians have only paired up for one title, as Jerry Ross was not a factor really in 2014. Them and the Sunrisers are not only the only finalists, but the only team with multiple overseas retained. But the Sunrisers players are slightly younger and less broken down than a 36-year-old Dre Ross. But KKR is choosing to run it back, and so much of their success is having the two all-round talents in the middle. So, I don't know, roll with it. Also, spin is their thing, and so Varun Chakravarti is still on their books. He started slow last year and then took off towards the end. He's 33, so you are adding a third old fella here. However, he isn't like a normal 33-year-old, as he's barely bowled professionally in his life. There are also not many spinners out there like him. Of the locals, they picked up Harsha Rana before he was capped. That is very handy. Ramandeep too. They have done well with both of those signings. Even if they fail, you've not really lost anything, and their upside is massive. They spent a lot of money on Rinku Singh, who gets almost a crore for every 10 runs he made last year. He has had 2 great years in his bag as he reaches 27, and this should be where he peaks. But it's also a huge increase from 5.5 crore to 13 for a player who has faced a career total of 623 IPL deliveries. Not to mention that he doesn't keep or bowl, and he's coming off a bit of a patchy season for him. Phil Salt is the interesting one for me here because they've taken so many players, they can't do a right to match. And he is the younger coming overseas player in this lineup. I understand it doesn't quite match what they're trying to do because of that all-round talent they want from the West Indians. But it does mean that they kind of lucked out with Phil Salt this season, and they're not going to be able to bring him back without paying him in the auction. I think there are some KKR fans who will be very upset that Venki is not there, but I'm not sure how they would have ever fit him into this lineup. And Mitchell Starc would not be retained. He would not be right to match either. He's just gone from this franchise, unless he gets overpaid in the auction. They have retained the batter that everyone wants, the 2 openers with their trendy Portman 2, and the young all-rounder. They've also given Reddy only 6 crores, so the older fellas can get a lot more money. That means they get a bit of a discount on that player, but still are spending a fortune altogether. You add T and Natarajan to this, and job done, hit the pub, nothing to see here. Unfortunately, they couldn't do that, as they had to take up Pat Cummins. Their raw numbers are similar, but Natarajan had a way better year. Natarajan was half a run better on true economy than Cummins was this year, and also did it with a positive true wickets, and Cummins was negative in that. But Cummins is 2 years younger, and he has some batting, although he does also take up an overseas spot. Natarajan is a way more useful bowler, and there are not many Indian seamers of his level. The problem is the captaincy thing over and over again, so of course they have gone with Cummins. But because they have 5 capped players, unless I'm misreading this, they can't actually use their right to match on Natarajan. Not only that, they couldn't use it on Washington Sundar either. So they have 2 really interesting local players that they would probably want to give a contract to, and instead they're going to have to give it to their captain. And they're another team like Rajasthan who has got it right in the last cycle and ended up with a pretty good team. But unfortunately, because of this reset mega auction style, it just means that they're kind of in a much worse position than they should be. Abhishek Head and Klaasen might be so good and so revolutionary that it doesn't matter all that much. But there is a chance that they actually take a small step back next season. And that's ultimately why I don't really like the mega auction. I will do a piece on this later on. But this whole idea that the mega auction helps with parity, does it really when we still see Chennai, Mumbai and Kolkata win so many titles? Anyway, that's it for the retentions. Comment below on your favorite one or the one that really upsets you morally, like deep in your soul. But comment, like and subscribe, and remember to tell your mum about us. I have a book out with Abhishek Mukherjee, and it is called Overthrowing Cricket's Empire. And it's about the stories of how each team beat England for the first time. We go all the way back to the demon Fred Spofforth getting annoyed at W.G. Grace for acting a little bit like Alex Carey. And then we come all the way to present times with Rashid Khan's England's redemption. We cover every single team to beat England in a major international, but we also talk about the incredible stories like the barefoot basher from Fiji that almost played for New Zealand. In fact, this book is full of tales like that. Like how Pakistan lost a top batter after he was on the run from an angry husband of a movie star he was having an affair with. And also how one future captain of his nation realised he might have to go out and bat at Lords and that he didn't own his own pads. Cricket was used as a tool by the empire, but what happens when those nations grow up and get good at it? Find Overthrowing Cricket's Empire on Amazon today.